Belief is the quiet force that shapes everything long before the result ever appears. Before success becomes visible, before progress feels real, before any achievement takes form in the physical world, it exists as a decision inside the mind. The moment you genuinely believe something is possible for you, your relationship with effort, failure, and persistence changes. Life no longer feels like something that happens to you, but something you actively move through with intention. This is where real transformation begins, not with motivation, but with conviction. Most people misunderstand belief. They treat it as hope, as wishful thinking, or as blind optimism. But belief is far more grounded than that. It is a mental agreement you make with yourself about what you are capable of becoming. When belief is strong, it influences how you interpret obstacles. Challenges no longer signal stop signs, they become instructions. Setbacks no longer define your limits, they reveal where growth is required. Belief quietly restructures how the mind processes difficulty, replacing hesitation with determination. Every action you take is filtered through what you believe to be true about yourself. If you believe you are capable, you act differently, you speak differently, you approach risk with courage rather than fear. On the other hand, if you believe you are limited, even the best opportunities will feel unreachable. This is why belief always comes before achievement. The external world mirrors the internal one, and the mind sets the ceiling long before reality does. Clarity is the next essential layer. Belief without direction loses its power. You must know exactly what you want, not in vague terms, but with precision. When your goal is clearly defined, belief has something to attach itself to. The mind thrives on specificity. It begins to recognize patterns, notice opportunities, and adjust behavior in subtle ways that align with the desired outcome. This process often happens unconsciously, yet it is driven entirely by belief anchored to purpose. The brain itself adapts to what you consistently believe and focus on. Repeated thoughts strengthen neural pathways, shaping habits, reactions, and emotional responses. When belief is reinforced daily, it becomes part of your identity. You no longer try to succeed, you expect progress. This expectation fuels persistence, especially when results are delayed. Belief does not eliminate struggle, it gives struggle meaning. Doubt, however, operates in the opposite direction. It fragments focus and drains energy. When doubt dominates, effort feels heavy and progress feels distant. Many people abandon their goals not because the goals were unrealistic, but because they allowed doubt to interrupt belief. The moment belief weakens, consistency collapses. This is why protecting belief is essential. It is not arrogance or denial of reality. It is the discipline of choosing trust over fear. History consistently shows that those who achieve extraordinary results do not begin with extraordinary certainty. They begin with a refusal to abandon belief. Failure does not stop them because belief reframes failure as feedback. Each attempt becomes information. Each mistake becomes a guide. What separates achievers from quitters is not talent, intelligence, or luck, but the decision to maintain belief even when evidence is incomplete. Belief grows through action. Every small step taken in alignment with your goal strengthens confidence. Each effort proves to your mind that progress is possible. Over time, belief becomes self-reinforcing. You trust yourself more because you have evidence, not just of success, but of resilience. You learn that belief does not require perfect conditions. It only requires commitment. At its core, belief is the foundation upon which everything else stands. Strategy, discipline, skill, and opportunity all depend on it. Without belief, they remain unused. With belief, they evolve into momentum. Once belief is established, the mind begins to work with you rather than against you. And when that shift happens, progress becomes not just possible, but inevitable.
Once belief is established, the mind begins to search for alignment. This is where belief stops being internal and starts shaping behavior. You may not consciously notice it at first, but your choices begin to change. The way you use time shifts. The way you respond to discomfort evolves. You start acting as someone who expects results rather than someone waiting for permission. Belief quietly reorganizes priorities, pulling you toward habits that support growth and away from behaviors that dilute focus. One of the most powerful ways belief strengthens itself is through visualization. When you consistently imagine yourself achieving your goal, your brain treats that image as meaningful. It begins to familiarize itself with success. This mental rehearsal reduces fear because the outcome no longer feels foreign. The mind performs best in environments it recognizes, and visualization creates that familiarity before results appear. Over time, confidence increases, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because it feels attainable. Belief also sharpens perception. You start noticing opportunities that once blended into the background. Conversations carry more weight. Information feels more relevant. Even obstacles become useful, revealing weaknesses that need refinement rather than reasons to stop. This heightened awareness is not coincidence. It is the mind filtering reality based on what you believe matters. Focus determines what you see, and belief determines what you focus on. Discipline begins to emerge naturally when belief is strong. Instead of forcing yourself to act, you feel internally driven. Effort no longer feels like sacrifice, it feels like alignment. This is the difference between pushing and pulling yourself forward. When belief pulls you, consistency becomes sustainable. You are no longer relying on motivation, which is temporary, but on identity, which is stable. You act because it feels like who you are becoming. Fear does not disappear at this stage, but its influence weakens. Fear becomes informational rather than paralyzing. You learn to interpret discomfort as a sign of expansion rather than danger. This shift is critical because growth always demands leaving the familiar. Belief provides the psychological safety needed to move forward despite uncertainty. It tells you that discomfort is not a warning, it is evidence of progress. Action taken from belief creates momentum. Small wins compound, reinforcing confidence and sharpening skill. Even when results are slow, belief keeps effort intact. You stop measuring success only by outcomes and begin measuring it by consistency. This perspective protects belief from being shaken by temporary setbacks. Progress becomes something you build daily, rather than something you wait for. Eventually, belief and action begin to merge. You no longer question whether you belong on this path. Doubt still exists, but it no longer controls direction. The internal dialogue shifts from "can I do this?" to "how do I do this better?" This is a subtle but powerful transition. It marks the moment when belief moves from fragile to durable. At this point, belief is no longer something you remind yourself of, it is something you operate from. Your decisions carry intention, your effort carries confidence, and your persistence is no longer dependent on external validation. You are moving because belief has anchored you to your purpose, and that anchor holds even when the path becomes difficult. As belief deepens and action becomes consistent, a profound shift begins to take place within your identity. This is where most transformations either solidify or quietly fall apart. Early belief can inspire action, but long-term belief reshapes how you see yourself. You stop viewing your goals as something external that you are chasing and begin to experience them as something internal that you are growing into. The shift is subtle, yet it determines whether progress lasts or fades. Identity is the framework through which the mind maintains consistency. When your actions align with who you believe you are becoming, resistance fades. You no longer rely on willpower alone because your behavior feels natural. Effort becomes expression. Discipline stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like integrity. You show up not because you are forcing yourself, but because not showing up would feel out of alignment with who you are now. This stage demands patience. Results may still lag behind effort, and this delay is where many people lose faith. But belief at this level is no longer fragile. You begin to understand that outcomes are not immediate reflections of effort, but delayed confirmations of consistency. Growth often happens quietly before it becomes visible. Skills develop before recognition. Strength builds before it is tested. Belief teaches you to trust the process even when progress feels invisible. Consistency becomes the defining factor, not intense bursts of effort, but steady, repeatable action. Belief sustains this rhythm. It removes the emotional volatility that causes people to quit after setbacks or slow periods. Instead of reacting emotionally to daily outcomes, you stay anchored to long-term direction. This emotional stability is a powerful advantage. It allows you to continue when others stop, not because you are stronger, but because you are clearer. At this stage, self-talk becomes critical. The internal dialogue you maintain either reinforces belief or erodes it. You begin to recognize how language shapes perception. The words you repeat internally influence how challenges are interpreted. Instead of framing obstacles as proof of limitation, you frame them as feedback. Instead of labeling effort as exhausting, you label it as necessary. This conscious shift in internal language strengthens belief and protects momentum. You also develop a new relationship with failure. Failure loses its emotional charge. It no longer defines your worth or capability. It becomes data. Each mistake highlights an adjustment. Each misstep reveals a skill gap. Belief allows you to stay curious rather than discouraged. This mindset accelerates growth because learning replaces self-judgment. You stop asking why something went wrong and start asking what can be improved. Time begins to work differently for you. When belief is shallow, time feels like pressure. When belief is strong, time becomes an ally. You understand that mastery is built gradually and that consistency compounds. You stop rushing outcomes and focus on process. This patience creates sustainability. Burnout becomes less likely because effort is no longer driven by anxiety, but by alignment. External validation also loses its grip. Praise becomes appreciated but not required. Criticism becomes informative but not destabilizing. You no longer measure progress through comparison. Instead, you compare who you are now to who you were before. This internal metric keeps belief grounded and resilient. It prevents distraction and protects focus. As belief integrates fully into identity, your decisions become cleaner. You waste less energy debating whether to act. You already know the answer. The question shifts from, should I do this, to what is the most effective way to do this? This efficiency conserves mental energy and sharpens execution. Progress becomes smoother, not because challenges disappear, but because resistance decreases. Eventually, belief stops feeling like something you maintain and starts feeling like something you embody. You trust your capacity to adapt. You trust your willingness to persist. Even uncertainty no longer feels threatening because belief has taught you that clarity emerges through action. You move forward not because you see the entire path, but because you trust yourself to navigate it as it unfolds. At this level, belief becomes quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. It does not need constant reinforcement. It does not seek proof. It simply guides behavior day after day. And this is where lasting change is formed, not through dramatic moments, but through sustained alignment between belief, identity, and action. As belief becomes embedded into identity, it begins to influence how you respond to pressure. This is where long-term resilience is formed. Life does not become easier, but your capacity to remain steady expands. Challenges no longer feel personal, they feel structural, problems to be solved rather than threats to your sense of self. This emotional separation is powerful because it prevents stress from overwhelming clarity. You remain present, thoughtful, and adaptable even when circumstances are uncertain. Resilience is not about enduring endlessly. It is about recovering quickly and learning continuously. Belief fuels this recovery. When something doesn't work, you don't spiral into self-doubt. Instead, you recalibrate.
You analyze what happened, extract insight, and adjust direction without losing momentum. This adaptability keeps progress alive. It allows you to evolve rather than resist change. Belief gives you permission to pivot without feeling like you failed. At this stage, your relationship with effort matures. You learn when to push and when to pause. Rest no longer feels like weakness, and intensity no longer feels forced. You understand that sustainability matters more than speed. This awareness protects belief from burnout. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to prove something, you focus on building something that lasts. Energy becomes a resource you manage intentionally rather than expend emotionally. Belief also shapes how you handle uncertainty. You stop demanding guarantees before acting. You accept that clarity often arrives after movement begins. This willingness to act without complete certainty separates growth-oriented individuals from those who remain stuck. Belief replaces the need for control with trust in your ability to respond. You move forward knowing you can adapt as new information emerges. Over time, this mindset fosters emotional strength. You become less reactive. External events lose their power to derail your focus. You no longer interpret temporary setbacks as permanent conditions. You understand that progress is rarely linear, and this understanding stabilizes your confidence. Belief anchors you during fluctuations, preventing emotional extremes that disrupt consistency. Your goals also begin to evolve. Early goals are often driven by external validation or urgency. As belief deepens, your goals become more aligned with values. You pursue growth not just for results, but for fulfillment. Purpose replaces pressure. This alignment makes effort meaningful even when outcomes are delayed. You are no longer chasing success, you are building a life that reflects your values. This shift also affects how you interact with others. You stop competing for approval and start collaborating from confidence. You listen more carefully, communicate more clearly, and set boundaries more easily. Belief strengthens self-respect, which improves relationships and decision-making. You are no longer swayed by opinions that conflict with your direction. Eventually, belief teaches you patience without complacency. You remain driven but grounded. You stay ambitious but present. This balance prevents extremes. You don't rush the process, yet you don't drift aimlessly. Every action is intentional, guided by clarity rather than anxiety. Progress becomes steady, not frantic. In this stage, belief is no longer about proving anything. It is about honoring your commitment to growth. You trust the work you are doing, even when recognition is absent. You understand that consistency is its own reward, and that fulfillment comes from alignment, not applause. This realization creates inner stability that external circumstances cannot easily shake. Belief, now fully integrated, acts as a quiet compass. It does not shout or demand attention. It simply guides you forward, one decision at a time. And through this guidance, you build resilience, not as a defense mechanism, but as a natural outcome of sustained belief and intentional action. At this point, belief has moved beyond motivation and mindset and settled into something deeper, a way of living. It shapes how you wake up each day, how you interpret progress, and how you define success. You no longer measure your life only by outcomes, but by alignment. The question is no longer whether you are capable, but whether you are honoring the direction you've chosen. This shift brings a sense of calm confidence that does not depend on constant reassurance. Belief now influences how you relate to time and patience. You understand that meaningful growth unfolds over seasons, not moments. There is less urgency to arrive and more commitment to build. You trust that consistent effort, applied thoughtfully, will produce results even if the timeline remains uncertain. This trust allows you to stay present in the work rather than obsessed with the finish line. You also begin to recognize how far you've come, not just in achievements, but in awareness, discipline, and emotional strength. The version of you who once doubted your ability to persist has been replaced by someone who knows they can adapt. This recognition is not arrogance, it is earned confidence. It comes from showing up repeatedly, learning continuously, and choosing belief even when it was uncomfortable. Belief now serves as a stabilizer during moments of success as well. You don't lose yourself in wins or allow them to define your worth. Success becomes information rather than identity. You stay grounded, knowing that growth is ongoing and that fulfillment comes from continued alignment rather than final outcomes. This perspective keeps progress sustainable and meaningful. Challenges still arise, but they no longer feel overwhelming. You have developed the internal tools to navigate them with clarity. When doubt appears, you recognize it without letting it take control. When fear surfaces, you acknowledge it without retreating. Belief does not eliminate these emotions, it places them in proper context. They become part of the experience rather than obstacles to it. Your actions now reflect intention rather than reaction. You make decisions based on long-term values instead of short-term emotion. This intentionality creates momentum that feels natural rather than forced. Life becomes less about chasing and more about building. Each step feels connected to the larger direction you've chosen. Ultimately, belief teaches you that fulfillment is not found at the end of a journey, but within the process of becoming. The work itself becomes rewarding because it aligns with who you are. You move forward not because you fear failure, but because growth feels meaningful. This is the quiet power of belief. It sustains effort, sharpens focus, and gives purpose to persistence. And this is the truth that remains. When you truly believe you can and will achieve what you set out to do, your actions begin to reflect that certainty. Over time, reality follows, not through sudden miracles, but through steady alignment between belief, effort, and identity. This is how goals are reached, lives are shaped, and lasting change is built.